Great. Welcome everybody to Module 3 of the NBCC Part 3 training with Reich. We're going to keep going. You see the slide. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So you have seen all this, and remember the information is copyrighted. This is just to help you with navigating the code, understanding the interconnections between the different code sections, subsections, articles, references between different articles and sentences and clause. You gotta use the full code and to apply it to a specific project. Okay. So for today, we're going to go into Module 3. Before we go into Module 3, you have any questions related to the to the quizzes for Module 1 and Module 2? Any question related to that?
I did have a question for the superimposed floor areas, just relating to the Article 32272, when you have multiple major occupancies. So just looking at that article, it mentions that the fire rating for the floor assemblies would be determined based on the requirements of the lower major occupancy.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering, in a scenario where you have, say, like a more stringent occupancy that's above a less stringent occupancy, does this technically mean that your floor slab can be rated based on the requirements of the less stringent, which would be the lower major occupancy?
If you have a less restrictive, so if you, let's take a look for the sake of everybody, 32272, you were saying?
Yes.
Okay. So this is when we're looking at the classification of occupancies, and we said for superimposed major occupancies, 32272 states, and this is the actual statement. Let's make sure that we all read it to get it right. If one major occupancy is located above another major occupancy, the fire resistance rating of the floor assembly between the two major occupancies shall be determined on the basis of the requirements of this subsection for the lower major occupancy. So you apply it you apply for each separate the classification for each occupancy. If you have a floor assembly above, that would be required for based on the construction of the assembly major occupancy above the lower one, and that floor assembly is has a fire rating that 322 gives it as less than what would be for the lower one. Yeah, it would be less. But what did we say in terms of it would be a lower rating than would be required for the first one? However, what else you need to double check in order to make sure that you have not missed another protection level between the major occupancies?
So that would be the other table. I'm just have to check what it was called.
Yeah, exactly. That's at the beginning.
Table 3131.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. So there's never a case where when you consider both table 3131 and then 32272, the two of these would provide, say, like conflicting information, in that you'd end up having like a fire separation that would be perhaps lower compared to the more stringent requirements of the above. I guess maybe just to paraphrase that, it just means that you always have to consider both, because one may give you a more stringent requirement compared to the other.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Okay.
Especially because you're dealing with major occupancies. And the only time you need to forget about the two major occupancies is if you have them mixed on the same floor, and then the exception for that is 3228. But if your whole floor area is considered a major occupancy and the ones above a totally different major occupancy, then 3228 it does not apply in this case, because they're not mixed on the same story.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay. Any other question on the quizzes?
Hi, this is Khadija. Yes, I have a question.
Go ahead, Khadija.
So my question was about number 9 and 10. So I will
Okay.
start with number 9, where it's saying that the storage garage that we have is going to serve the hospital, and it can be constructed with no limitation on building area and can be of combustible construction if it is not permitted. So I actually couldn't find this information in the code, so maybe you can help to locate where exactly we can
Okay.
find this article.
So you were in, where are
Question
we
number
now? This is module 1 or module 2? Let's see.
module 1,
Module 1, and this is question 9.
right?
Okay, an open air storage garage serving the hospital can be constructed with no limitation on building area. It can be of combustible construction if its height is not more than 22 meter has. So did you take a look at the different types of constructions in 3222 applicable to the storage garage, which is group F3? So take a look at, so if somebody has an answer for Khadija, because I'm looking at 32290 and the provisions for a group F division 3. 32290, 32288, 32286, 85, 84, 83. So there is multiple group F division 3. But if I look at 32290, the only one that I see that I can have an open air storage garage serving with no limitation on building area, and if I need to construct it with combustible construction, I do not. I only see one that in 32290 tells me I can have a storage garage with all stories constructed as open air stories, having no other occupancy above it, is permitted to have its floor, wall, ceiling, and roof constructed without fire resistance rating, provided it is of non-combustible construction, not more than 22-meter high, and not more than 10,000 square meter in building area. So, and there's every portion of each floor is within 60 meter. So this one has got limitation on it, and it can be constructed of combustible and non-combustible construction. And then if I go through all the rest of them, I see limitation on building area for each one of them. The only one I don't see any limitation on building area for group F3 is 32280, except 32280 tells me that I have to use non-combustible construction. So the answer to section 9, it should be what?
It's not permitted.
Exactly, it's not permitted. So you gotta be careful in terms of the question is giving you information, and then the answers are giving you two more conditions that apply. And if they don't apply and they're not permitted, then you need to make sure that go through the allowed construction for storage garages to see what's permitted and what's not. And that's all in three. Somebody has background noise. Can you please turn off? Mark, I think when you put your microphone on, background noise from your area is coming through.
Yes, okay. Sorry. I have something about this item.
Yeah,
At number 9, I had a different approach answering this one.
go ahead.
Yeah, so I checked the index about open air storage garage and found that it is not mentioned anywhere in part 3. It's mentioned in part 9, and part 9 buildings doesn't include occupancy B. That's why I answered it's not permitted.
Mark, we're doing part 3 buildings. So in part 3 buildings, and we're talking about open air storage garages. They are defined in part 1. And we have, if you take a look at 32290, we have the provisions applicable to storage garage. We also talked on the fire separations yesterday related to storage garage fire separations from other building areas. So in hazardous occupancies. So So double check the hazardous occupancy requirements. You will see storage garage. Double check the definitions in part 1, and also double check the construction provisions of 32290, and you will see some requirements, allowances for open air storage garages. The storage garages are covered by part 3, especially if they are more than 600 square meters and more than 3 stories high, which there's lots of them.
But they're not listed in the index. I agree, because I went through the same process, and it references part yeah. 9 only.
Okay, so what does that tell us in terms of the index?
Don't rely on it.
Exactly. So it's your last resort. It's not your first resort. Your first resort is going through the table of content, looking at the construction requirements. We know that 322 tells us what are the construction requirements. We go to 322. We know to 31 is general provisions and occupancies. So we go to 3.1. If we go to, so these are all the different section headings and subsection headings. We need to be familiarized with them and tap those to make sure that we know where to go when we have questions related to, for example, types of constructions, mezzanines. We're going to take a look at exits 3.4. We know that there's high buildings in 3.2.6. So these are the things that you need to be comfortable with and learning how to, and these are the headings of the different sections and subsections that are critical for you to know how to navigate the code. Any other questions?
Yeah, okay, so I think like I was going with the wrong approach, because this specific section was talking about a hospital that has a storage garage on it. So I was looking at division B, yeah, and trying to find the answer from that sections. But apparently, if we are talking garage storage, so it has to fall into division F, and I need to check the categories for that as well.
Yeah. Basically, this told you there is an open air storage garage serving the hospital. It serves the hospital. It's not on the hospital. So again, it's read the question. When you're doing your exam, you got to read the questions carefully and not make assumptions related to the location of something unless that is a given information.
Right. And my next question will be for number 10, which is also talking about the hospital exterior wall that has a limiting distance of 7 meters. The cladding is permitted to be both combustible or non-combustible construction. Yeah. So I was also having difficulty finding this information because I was looking at the table of the limiting distance, and I mean, that doesn't specify, like I couldn't find it actually, so.
Yeah. Now we know that our hospital is going to be sprinklered, and we've determined that. So the openings for 7 meter, if you look at table 3231, remember those tables, 32, if the building is not sprinklered, if you determine the building is not sprinklered, you go 3231 B. If the building is sprinklered, 3231 D. If it's an F3 and F2 and F1 and a Group E occupancy, it's 3231 C and E. So in our case, we're dealing with the hospital, so it's 3231 D. And if you take a look at that table, if you for 7 at 7 meters, we know the limiting distance is permitted to be of combustible, non-combustible construction. So we have 88 to 150 to 66, 100 to 100. So in most of the cases that you will see, you're permitted to have your type of construction may be required to be non-combustible for the case of, is there any case where it'd be required to be non-combustible? If you have 7 meters. Because if you're looking at the table, we see that's 100%. When you're over 100% permitted,
right?
And if you're more than 50 and you're between 50 and 100%, which is the case at 7 meters, for all the largest openings, you get 66% permitted openings, right? For your largest exposed building face. If you're with 150 square meter or more, because you don't have the information. So you're gonna assume, okay, it's a, what's the worst case condition? I have more than 150 square meter wall. Then in this case, I've got 66% allowed opening. For 66%, I'm still between 50 and 100 in table 3237. And for that, I get 45 minutes fire resistance for the exterior wall. I can construct it. I am a non-combustible construction for building, so I have to make sure of that. I'm allowed cladding that is combustible, non-combustible. But however, is the cladding to be both combustible and non-combustible construction? I am in a non-combustible. I know that it is allowed to be both. But if my building is of non-combustible construction, what's my cladding construction type?
It can be combustible also.
It can have combustible components. It can have combustible components. True. Okay. As long as they meet the provision of 315.
Right.
Okay.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So with that,
can we review question 6 on quiz 1, please?
question 6 in 6. Okay.
Yeah. Question 6.
Yeah. So which major occupancies are permitted in a building of group F division 1? What are the answers?
2 and 3, but I'm not sure.
Exactly. Yeah, 2 and 3. Right. So you probably got it right. You guys agree with him?
But can you clarify how those are the answers?
Yeah. Okay. So the division 1, when you're looking at the beginning of 322, go back at the beginning of 322s. Oh, sorry about that. This is the occupancies provisions. So in under 3.1. Okay, let's go back to that one. Multiple occupancy requirements, prohibition of occupancy combinations in 3132. Okay. So I know that no major occupancy of group F1 shall be contained with a building with any occupancy classified as A, B, or C. Do you see it? 31321? 321. Okay. Anything on module 2? Quiz?
I have a question. If I think it's on module 2 quiz.
Okay.
It's question number. Oh God, where is it? Now I lost my question.
Sorry, Amal, I'm interrupting. Actually, my question is still about that module 1, number 6, about the.
Sorry about that. So let's finish number 1.
Occupancy with F1.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. What's your question?
Hello?
Yeah, I hear you. What's your question? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought my mic is not working. So
B, we're just gonna take this question and we'll get back to you.
having difficulty understanding the occupancy type D, because on 3132.4, it's talking that a building conforming to Article 32258, which is a D occupancy, shall not contain the F1 and the clause B. So I'm not sure why the item with the occupancy D is also permitted.
Oh, okay. Let's see. When you're looking at the construction provisions for item 4, it's specific to the construction of 32258. So only for 32258, that's the specific type of construction that we allowed. And with group D, you can have that group D occupancy without, but to be constructed in accordance with 32258, which is combustible type of construction. But in that case, you cannot have a group division 1 with it. Normally, you can have a group D with division 1. However, if you want to construct the building with 32258, you cannot have an F1 in it. But in general, so it's a generic question, the first one, which goes back to 31321. Okay, but it was not specific to it's not specific to 32258.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, B, what was your question on module 2?
Sorry, I'll try to be quick. So it is in reference to question number 7, module 2, quiz from module 2. So does table 3.1.3.1 apply for separation of the treatment areas and teaching areas? So my question, I got this one wrong because I thought this question number 7 refers to the question 6 too, the question prior to it.
Yeah, it is.
But why it appears that the false should be the correct answer. I had it true because I did have a look at the table 3.1.3.1 and to kind of see what the separation is required. If the separation is required, then why the correct answer is false?
Okay, when you remember when we defined the major occupancy. So the major occupancy is based on the major use of the building, and there's the teaching, then an auditorium for medical students where you have specifically it's a medical teaching auditorium that's part of the hospital.
Sure. Yeah.
It's part of the operation of the hospital. So the students will have hands-on, will have workshop in there, and it will be probably they'll do operations in front of the students, and they may, you know how they'll be, the students will take time to view. So this is intrinsic to the operation of the hospital. It's a teaching hospital, so it's not a major occupancy. The auditorium will not be a major occupancy in this case.
But the question number 6 correct answer was two types of occupancies, A2
exactly.
and B2. So if we have 2, therefore they are 2, and I cannot tell if this auditorium is 10% of the entire building or maybe might be more than that. And if it is, then I do require fire separation.
Okay, let's go back to if I have office spaces within within my hospitals, do I consider the office spaces as major occupancy or just an occupancy that is intrinsic to the operation of the hospital?
Well, they are not major for sure.
They're not major. However, they're still offices, and I don't protect them like the patient rooms in the hospital or an operating room in the hospital. And if I need to protect them in accordance with 3.3, then I am looking at the classification of the space itself. Their offices are not hazardous rooms. So but I do need to classify every floor area for the use of the floor area, and I know that, and I designate that as an occupancy. It's not a major occupancy, but it is an occupancy. The same thing with the teaching auditorium. It is an occupancy within the hospital. It is part of the intrinsic operation of the teaching hospital. Therefore, it's not a major occupancy, but it's one of the uses and occupancies on the floor area of that hospital floor. Therefore, 3131 does not apply. However, it's the use of that area of the auditorium is teaching. But then let's see, is it a group B2? Is it a group A2? The question becomes for the use of the occupancy and how to protect it. I really don't know if they're going to be teaching the students, showing them operations. So, like sometimes they would have like an operation room and then the students around it and watching and learning. I'm not sure if it's that kind of auditorium or it's just a regular type of auditorium where you have a lecturer comes in and speaks to you and then you go and leave. In this case, if it's an operation auditorium, then I have to I have to protect it like a B2 because there's a patient that's being operated on. If it's and an A2 at the same time, but if it's only a teaching space, like a regular teaching space in a as a classroom auditorium with no operations, then I can consider that floor space as an A2 and protect it for its, and design it only with an A2 provisions. So this is like this. There's a fine difference here between, you gotta take a look at your major occupancy first for the classification of the construction, separation of occupancies. These are major occupancies, but then you've got the uses within the floor areas of the building and whether those uses, how they need to be protected and what's their own classification. It's based on what do you do in that floor space.
Sure, and that does make sense, but we are
Yeah.
not provided with clarifications here what teaching auditorium this auditorium is. I
Yeah,
just
and
assume
that's
it's a
why.
teaching as A2.
Oh,
Therefore,
okay.
the separation would be applicable from the table 3.1.3.1.
No, we said the separation does not apply because it's not a major occupancy. It's intrinsic to the teaching hospital operation.
Well,
310
then
is-
in either case, it's not applicable then, because you would have either B2 or I mean, it would be just B2 in doesn't matter what kind of auditorium it is.
For the purposes of occupancy separation, yeah. But in item 6, the provisions for this floor area, when you're looking at the auditorium, item 6 is not talking about occupancy classification. Select the occupancy of the use, not the major occupancy classification. We're talking about the use of the area and its occupancy classification. If I don't know what it is, I'm looking at both A2 and B2. That's the right answer.
Okay, yeah, I got that as a right answer, but
Yeah.
number 7 was incorrect. But thank you.
Yeah, but number 7, because we're not dealing with major occupancies. There is only one major occupancy, which is the B2. That's one major occupancy. We're not talking about subsidiary occupancies.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Any other question? Nijar, your hand is still raised. Did we answer your question? So I'm gonna close that and go to files. Okay. Okay, so in module 3, we're going to look over the fire protection systems in the building, fire life safety systems, provisions for firefighting. We're going to take a look at egress and exiting, and we're going to take a look at occupant load calculation and exit capacity. Don't worry for the occupant load and calculation exit capacity. We're going to review them again in this afternoon. So hopefully we will be able to catch up. So we looked at construction, occupancy, vertical compartmentation, spatial separation, horizontal compartmentalization based on the uses. We looked at high building provisions, special protection, interconnected floor spaces, and now we're going to take a look at fire protection, life safety systems, firefighting provisions, egress and exiting. We're looking egress from suites and floor areas and mezzanines, travel distances between exits and egress. And we're going to take a look at occupant load determinations. So for, what are the fire protection and life safety systems in a building? The building code addresses the fire alarm systems. It addresses the use of standpipes, the uses of extinguishers, the use of sprinklers, we've seen that, as well as looks at the emergency smoke control system. We saw that for interconnected floor spaces. We saw also for vestibules that sometimes need to be protected for high-rise buildings. We also have pressurization systems, as well as we have seen the provisions of, these are all the different active and active systems in the buildings. So When is a fire alarm required? Keep this code to 32411. So every time I have a sprinkler building, I must have a fire alarm system. And then in other buildings, whether sprinklered or not, you need to take a look at this 32411. Okay, building containing more than 3 stories, counting basement levels. Okay, a fire alarm system, this is 32414. A fire alarm system shall be installed in a building that is not sprinkled throughout and that contains a contained use area. This is in some of the psychiatric hospitals as well, detention areas. Impeded egress zones, more than 3 stories, including the stories below the first story. So you count the 3 stories. Total occupant load more than 300 other than open air seating areas. On occupant load more than 150 above or below the first story other than open air seating. And then a school or a daycare with an occupant load exceeding 40. A restaurant or other licensed establishment with an occupant load exceeding 150. Residential occupancy with sleeping accommodation with more than 10 persons. This is, the slide lists a few of them, but you have to go back to 32414 to see the whole list for all the other conditions requiring fire alarm systems. So we've got 2 different types of fire alarm systems, and the code addresses both types. 3243. We've got a single stage, single stage fire alarm, a 2-stage fire alarm. Basically, a single stage fire alarm is required in group F1 occupancy. So basically, once you activate the fire alarm, it sounds the alarm for the whole building. So you don't have a first stage where sometimes you see it in hotels, sometimes you see it in malls, or sometimes you see it in hospitals, where you sound the alarm, but then you've got a voice and it only sounds in certain areas of the buildings, and then successively it's going to be going into a full building alarm. That's the 2-stage fire alarm. So 3243 is critical to know in terms of where a single stage fire alarm is required, and in 2-stage where 2 stages are permitted. So that's 3243. So 1 stage sends an alarm signal to all audible devices in the system. A 2-stage system sounds an alert signal. If not acknowledged within 5 minutes, an alarm signal will activate. Provisions for firefighting, access to above and ground stories. Let's take a look at the 325, which is provisions for firefighting. So under article, so in a non-sprinklered building, you need to provide access to above grades. Firefighting for the buildings only required 2 stories which are not sprinkled and less than 25 meters above grade. 1 access opening for each 15 meters of wall is required to face a street, and access panels above the first stories are required to be of plain glass so that they can able to access through them. So this is applicable for non-sprinklered buildings, and you might come across them in schools. You might come across them in low-rise type of buildings where you're not the type of construction does not require the building to be sprinkled. Direct access to basement also is required in unsprinkled basements with a horizontal dimensions more than 25 meters, and access is required directly from the outdoor. You don't go through a stair to access a basement. Again, this is for non-sprinkled conditions. Roof access is required on building exceeding 3 stories or where roof elevation is more than 4 meters above grade and contains HVAC equipment. And access for the roofs for firefighting is required via interior stairs or fixed ladder and hatch. So you got to provide access to the roof for firefighters. There's the access routes. Remember, we saw the access routes. All buildings which are more than 3 stories and more than 600 meters square in building area are required to be served by an access route, fire department access route. The access route must be 6 meters wide, have a 5 meter clearance, be able to support a fire truck in all weather conditions, and connected to building to a public thoroughfare. So the access routes, it's pretty much addressed in 3255 and 3254 and 3256. So these are all the articles related to the specifications for designing access routes. This is when you're doing your site planning. You also have to look at the access route for the fire department and how to position your building so that they can be within those specifications. Fire department connections are required when you have a standpipe and a sprinkler systems, and they need to be within 45 meters of a hydrant and unobstructed. Fire department connections are on the building exterior. Typically, we can put them in an area that it's close to the building entrance unless it's approved by the fire department. Fire department connections are you will see the provisions to fire department connections in 32515. Firefighting access and suppression 32210 and 3255. For building, one access is needed for a building with sprinklers, and typically to the front entrance unless the building fire department allows another access to be provided, and that's under alternative solution. When you have no sprinklers, you need to have, depending on the building construction, you need to have access to the firefighting and access to the building. Standpipe systems 3258 to 32511. We talked about the standpipe fire department connections, similar to sprinkler connections. Let's take a look at the standpipes. Then it's 3258. Take a look at 3258. Can you open the building code on 3258? Right before 3258, you will see at 3257, every building shall be provided with adequate water supply for firefighting. So the building code addresses fire water supplies, and it has a note in terms of how to determine what's an adequate water supply. It's in the back of the code. Municipal water supply, that's an adequate water supply typically. But if you have designing a system, especially in industrial buildings or residential areas that outside the cities, and you have to provide your own water supply, then you got to take a look at with the provision of 32357, the appendix notes, to make sure you provide water supplies adequate enough for the building systems to work. So the standpipe system under 3258, that standpipe system shall be installed in a building that is more than 3 stories in building height, that more than 14 meters measured between grade and the ceiling of the top story, or if it's not more than 14 meters and has a building area exceeding the area shown in table 3258. That's another table you need to be familiar with, because putting standpipes take up space, and you need to take a lot of coordination in mechanical with mechanical engineer on the project. So and it's going to impact your stairs, your shafts, if you are required to have a standpipe system, double check the provision of 3258, and it tells you those requirements. Hose stations are located within 5 meters. Then 3259 goes into design of the standpipe system, and it references the NFPA standards to which it needs to be designed. That's NFPA 14. 32511 addresses the hose stations and their locations. So within 5 meters of exits, they need to provide coverage to all floor area, and they need to be installed so that not to obstruct the means of egress. So make sure that they are not obstructions. And there is the 32511 has details about the provisions related to the hose cabinets. Now, standpipe systems, we saw this one. Hose connections for firefighters to connect their hose are required in the exits, but they're not required in the floor area where the building is sprinklered. Here, the National Building Code allows us to omit connections, hose connections, even though the standard NFPA 14 requires them to have it in the floor area. So if the building is sprinklered, we are not required to have hose connections for the standpipe system in the floor areas. They're only required in exits. Hose stations, the smaller ones, so when we talk about the firefighter connections for their hose, these are the 65 millimeter hose connections. The hose stations with a 38 millimeter hose, pre-attached, they are only required in unsprinkled building, required within 5 meters of an exit and other location for complete floor coverage. Cabinet door must not obstruct means of egress. So these are, I would recommend you, of course, you have to read those in details, but in general, the table 3258 is critical to know to know where you put standpipe systems in buildings. And then the following ones related to hose station locations, 32510 and 32511 are critical to know for your location of the hose connection, whether for firefighting hose connections or to have hose cabinets with hose, 38 millimeter hose attached. Okay. Commissioning 329. This is we talked about it briefly under module 1. 329 is a critical now addition to the building codes, and it says, and it's not actually commissioning. It's called integrated fire protection and life safety system testing. It used to be referenced as commissioning, but it's not. The OBC references it as commissioning. The NBCC actually in 329, if you go to that subsection 329, it's called Integrated Fire Protection and Life Safety Systems Testing. Okay, 329 says, where a fire protection and life safety systems and systems with fire protection and life safety functions are integrated with each other, they shall be tested as a whole in accordance with SCAN ULC S1001, integrated systems testing of fire protection and life safety system to verify that they properly are integrated. We talked about 3269 only for testing the systems for high-rise building. This goes beyond high-rise building. This applies to all buildings where we have fire protection and life safety systems installed. And it's not talking about just the commissioning requirements. It's talking about the integrated testing of all these systems so that to double check that they are properly integrated. If you are doing commissioning, which is the installers typically do it, they ensure the proper operation and interrelation between the systems. When you're doing the testing, you would ensure that each system functions properly individually and with another. These are typically done anyways, but when you do the integrated testing, you look at them together and how each of them functions when the one control requires another system to function. Especially when you have fire alarm system, when you have a smoke control system that's activated, or you have a fire suppression system that needs to go on, and then you need to connect it to your fire alarm system to monitor it. So, and supervisory valve, you need to look at the supervision of the valve and activation of the sprinkler system impacting the supervisory monitoring controls on your fire alarm systems. So these are all elements of the integrated testing for fire protection systems. We're gonna, any question on that? We're gonna go into exits and egress and exiting. So these are sections 3.3 and 3.4. We slightly looked at exits for corridor yesterday, but we're going to take a look at 3.3 and 3.4. 3.4 is related to exits. 3.3 looks at the floor areas and it's got provisions for exits. So the egress provide access to an exit from a floor area. And this one you have to go to section 3.3 to take for looking at the provisions to egress. So we are within the floor area and we access an exit. Exits provide access directly to the outdoors or horizontal another building if we have horizontal exits, and they are likely protected, the exits. So it could be an exit stair, it could be an exterior door. These are defined terms. So if you go under the defined terms for exits, we can take a look at it. Who can tell me what is definition of an exit based on the defined terms? Any volunteer?
I can read. Exit means that that part of means of egress, including doorways, that leads from the floor area it serves to a separate building, an open public thoroughfare, exterior, or an exterior open space protected from fire exposure from the building and having access to an open public thoroughfare.
Okay, and we have a note also related to it. That's note A141211. So, and then the means of egress, we have also means of egress.
Mark, can I just ask a quick question? These notes, A1412, I've seen quite a few today. Where are they located?
Oh, at the end of the division A part 1, at the end of part 1. And when you are in part 3, at the end of part 3. So that's what they are located at the end of each part.
Okay.
Okay, so now you're in for the 1412, it's at the end of 1412. If we look at the definition of means of egress. Okay, another volunteer for means of egress, please, quickly. 1412 means of egress. All right.
Means a continuous path of travel provided for the escape of persons from any point in the building or contained open space to a separate building. An open public thoroughfare or an exterior open space protected from fire exposure from the building and having access to an open public thoroughfare. Means of egress includes exits and access to exits.
So it's the means of egress includes both the egress and exit means of egress and access to exits. And the access to exits, I will read this one quickly. Access to exit means, actually, can somebody read for me the access to exits? My code page is missing access to exits, so make sure that your code pages do not miss it. Somehow there is a typo. My whole code page is gone here. Okay.
Access to exit means that part of means of egress within a floor area that provides access to an exit serving the floor area.
Okay. All right. So it provides access to an exit from a floor area. Okay. So where the building is 2 or more stories in building height, every floor area is required to have an access to minimum 2 exits unless otherwise exempted. So now we are in 3.4. In 3.3, a room or a suite having an occupant load of more than 60, the travel distance, depending on the type of occupancy, is either 15 or 25 meter, and an area of more than 150 meter to 300 square meters is required to have access to at least 2 means of egress. So what this is telling you is you got to take a look at 3.3 and 3.4. So if we stick with 3.3 now for egress, we take a look at 3.3, and it's going to have another set of tables you need to familiarize yourself with for addressing the egress from a space within the building, so within floor areas. So egress in the floor area is not sprinkled throughout. I've got table 3315A and I got table 3315B. They look at egress in floor areas in sprinklered building, and the area is sprinkled throughout. In 3315A, I'm looking at egress in floor areas, not sprinkled throughout. And those basically, there is exemptions that allow me to have one egress depending on occupant load, depending on the distance to an egress door, and depending on the area of the suite or room that I'm trying to exit from, to egress from. And if that room is sprinkled throughout or it's not sprinkled throughout. And that's not actually the room, it's the whole floor area sprinkled throughout or not. So these tables are critical to be familiarized ways for egress from rooms, as well as the provision of the Article 3315. Okay? So that's telling me how many doors I need to put from a room. For exits, I have to go to 3.4 for exits. So I go quickly to 3.4 and I look for number of exits. Again, this is at the beginning in 3421. 34211, except as permitted in sentence 2, every floor area intended for occupancy shall be served by 2 exits. A floor area, and then I've got exemptions related to it. And these with the exemptions, again, they relate at the travel distance to an exit. They look at whether the floor area is sprinkled or not throughout. And they look also at the minimum floor area of that floor area that is served by the exits. So this is to tell me whether I can put a single exit or otherwise I have to default to the minimum 2 exits required. Okay.
Excuse me, where
Go ahead.
now?
When in 3.4 for exits, yeah, in 3421.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so this is 3421. Maybe I'll make it simpler for you. I'm hoping that you are. We went to another level of here in this presentation. I didn't put the code section for you, trying to see if you're able to find them without by using the table of contents. As you have noticed, there is no table of contents in this presentation like we had on the first 2. So you gotta be able to be familiarized with using in part 3 the table of content, looking at the table of content, looking where the exits are, and right away go to the sections that we talk about. So in this case, we're talking about section 3.4, and I'm looking at 3.421, minimum number of exits. And in there, I have in general, every floor area requires 2 exits unless it meets, there are exceptions to it, and then you take a look at the exceptions for that in tables in sentence 2 of Article 3421. Exiting through lobbies, it's like a lot of residential buildings and some of the office building, you look at exiting through lobby. So here. Okay, so for exiting through a lobby, you allow all the time the exits we looked at the definition for exits, they discharge to the outside unless they're horizontal exits. So they need to go to a public open street or thoroughway. But in some cases, one of the exits is permitted to lead through a protected lobby. Okay, the exception in that in 3442, and if you go to 3442, you guys find it, exit through lobbies, except 34421, except as permitted in sentence 2, no exit from a floor area above or below the first story shall lead through a lobby. So, except as permitted in sentence 2, not more than one exit from a floor area is permitted to lead through a lobby provided. So now I know that only one exit is permitted to lead through a lobby. The lobby floor is not more than 4.5 meters above grade. So the lobby floor is it's the height limitation. You don't want to be the lobby to be too much, the floor of the lobby to be more than 4.5 meter above grade. The path of travel through the lobby to the outdoors is not more than 15 meter. So once you get from your stair into the lobby, from your stair door to the outside, the outdoors should not be than 15 meter. The adjacent room or premises having direct access to the lobby do not contain a cared residential or industrial occupancy. So now we're talking about the adjacent rooms adjacent to the lobby and opening directly onto the lobby. They should not contain any care, residential, or industrial occupancies. So that's another condition. The lobby is not located within an interconnected floor space other than described in 32826. So we know the exception of 32826. It's allowed under certain conditions, sprinklered lobby area. And the lobby, and it's only for certain types of occupancies. The lobby conforms to the requirement for exits, so it needs to be fire separated, except that rooms other than service rooms and storage rooms are permitted to open directly to the lobby. Exits, you cannot have any rooms other than the occupied rooms to be opening onto the exits. You cannot have a storage room and service rooms opening onto the exits. But the lobby, and the same way is for the lobby that is used for as an access to exit. The fire separation between the lobby and the room used for the sole purpose of control and supervision of the building need not have a fire resistance rating. So the fire separation between the lobby and adjacent occupancies are permitted to open onto the lobby, need not have a fire resistance rating provided the lobby and adjacent occupancies are sprinklered. And passenger elevators are permitted to open onto the lobby provided the elevator doors are designed to remain closed except while loading and unloading passengers. And fire separation construction in accordance with sentence 3441 is maintained between the lobby and any exit permitted by the sentence to lead through this lobby. So I gotta separate my exit. There is certain rooms that are allowed to open onto it. There's restriction on which rooms they cannot open directly to the lobby. There is provisions related to sprinkling. There's provisions related to travel distance from the door of the stair that discharges onto the lobby. There's a limitation on how many the number of exit stairs. It's just one that can do it. And there's limitation on the occupancies that can have direct access to the lobby. They need to be separated from it. And there is a fire separation requirement for specific types of rooms. And the door leading from the exit through the lobby is required to be equipped with panic door hardware and positive latching. So there's specific provisions for exits through lobbies, and you need to be aware of that one and read it carefully. Example, an exit through a lobby, 15 meter. This lobby would not permit it to be occupied. Typically, you don't have people sitting there unless this area is only used for control and security. Then you can have that. Doors and door hardware. We'll take a look again. We're looking when you see 33113. You know you're in the egress mode, right? On the floor area. When you see 34, you know it's doors for exits. Doors and door hardware, they have clear opening of not less than 800 millimeter for all major occupancies except B2 and B3. 850 millimeter for doors. They do not serve residents and or residents at the ambulatory residents in B2 and B3, and 1 meter 50 for patients and residents who are not ambulatory in B2 and B3.
Sorry, I had a quick question back on exits through lobbies in the comments.
Go ahead.
I was basically asking if two separate exits serving two separate floor areas can both exit through the same lobby.
No, no.
Because it says not more than one exit from a floor area. So as long as it's one exit from one floor area and one exit from a different floor area, are those considered separate?
It's permitted to lead through a lobby. I can see the question now. I understand it better. Then you have two separate floor areas, and they have independent exits. So
Yeah.
each floor area has two exits, and then another floor area has two separate exits.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. In this case, yes, that is permitted.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. So we go to the doors. Doors serving a room with or a suite having more than 60 people are required to swing in the direction of travel. So we are in 33113, and we can go through those requirements. I'm just giving you some of those provisions. Read them carefully. Panic hardware are required on doors that serve assembly occupancy with more than 100 people. Sliding doors must have breakaway feature when opening into a public door or used as egress door and an access to exits. So these are egress doors provisions that you need to make sure that you're aware of them, but go in detail into 33113 for looking at those requirements. Mag locks or magnetic locks are required if desired to restrict access in the direction of exit travels. They need to be designed in accordance with the provisions in 34616.4. The code does not require mag locks, but if you're going to have to use them, there is restrictions on using magnetic locks for keeping door open or for controlling for security access to certain areas. That's 34616.4, and actually these apply both for magloss on egress doors and as well as on exit doors. Exit stairs and ramps. If you will see that all exits, all stairs within the building will need to be designed as if they are similar with the dimensions requirements for egress for exit stairs. And I would like you to see that provision for ramp and stairways. If you look at 33114, ramp and stairways, before we go to the exit provisions, except as permitted by sentence 2, article 3347 and subsection 332, ramps and stairways do not serve an exit shall confirm that do not serve as an exit, or they're not required to be exits. Those ramps, interior ramps and stairways, shall conform to the requirements of exit ramps and exit stairways as stated in sentence 34328 and article 3434, 3461 to 3469. So unless they meet the exemptions of 33114.2, all egress stairs and all stairs and ramps within the floor area that are not designated exit stairs, they need to be designed based on the specific provision of 34328 and article 3434 and 3461 to 3469. They don't need to meet all the provisions required to exit stairs, but specific provisions that are listed under 33114. In ramps and stairways that serve as service rooms, service spaces, or industrial occupancies, they don't need, then you are into service rooms, service spaces, and industrial occupancies. Those ramps and stairways, they do not need to be designed with the provisions of Article 33114, Sentence 1, but only if they are not intended for, they are intended only for occasional use, for servicing the equipment, and they do not serve as an exit. So there is an exemption for allowing those industrial type of stairs and ladders within service spaces and occupancies and industrial occupancies. Now, if we go to 3432 and 3465, there's minimum requirements for widths of stairs and ramps with a minimum of 1100 millimeter, 1.1 meter. There is an allowance of 900 millimeter for stairs that serve no more than 2 floors above grades, or they serve not more than 1 story below grade. Handrails, similarly, we have handrails provisions for stairs. Each stair with that is 1.1 meter or more in width is required to have a handrail on both sides, and that handrail needs to extend 300 millimeter horizontally at the top and the bottom on one side. And intermediate handrails must be provided so that a handrail is reachable within 750 millimeter of all portion of the required exit width. At least one portion of the stair ramp between two handrails is the minimum width required, and all other portion of the stairs or ramp between two handrails have a clear width of 510 or more. So when we have more than 1100 millimeter, we need to have stairs. We start looking at the provision of having intermediate handrails. That's all in 3432, 3465. 3466 and 3468, the guards. The guards would be around walls. The guard can be a wall or a guard. So the wall serves as a guard for stairs, and or if you have an opening, you'll have a guard. The guard needs its height. It needs to be 1.07 meter along the stairways and at landings. Must obstruct 100 millimeter sphere from passing through, and cannot facilitate it climbing between 140 millimeter and 900 millimeters. So you want to be careful on how you design your guards, and you need to take a look at 3466 and 3468 for that. The rise of the stairs, there's a designing of your stairs is you're looking at the rise, you look at the runs, and you've got 5 to 10 millimeter construction tolerances and the requirements for beveled nosing. These are stair construction requirements provisions in 3.4. So taking a look at that, so you've got the rise, you've got your run, you've got some tolerances, and you've got the beveled nosing. So this is for specification related to egress and exit components. There's a requirement for doors. There's requirement for number of doors. There is requirement for width. There's requirement for looking at the exits. We're looking at interior stairs, interior ramps, exit stairs, exits, doors, and we're looking at provision of mag locks, magnetic locks on some doors and requirements related to that. Go carefully through 3.3 and 3.4 for the provisions related to specification of the construction requirement for those elements. Distance between exits. So we don't want to, in case of a fire, we want to be able to travel to an exit within a reasonable time. And the code requires there should be a minimum distance between exits, but you don't want them close enough. You want to have the exits separated. So the distance between exits is based on the shortest distance smoke has to travel, assuming that smoke will not penetrate an intervening fire separation. This is the way the code treats it. Let's take a look at the distance between exits at 3423. Three, 4, 2, 3. Look. 3, 4, 2, 3 before. I'll just go back to 34231. Except as provided in sentence 2, the least distance between two exits from a floor area shall be 1/2 the maximum diagonal dimension of the floor area, but need not be more than 9 meters for a floor area served by a public corridor, or 1/2 the maximum diagonal dimension of the floor area, but not less than 9 meters for all floor areas. Exits need not comply with sentence 1, where the floor area is divided so that not less than 1/3 of the floor area is on each side of a fire separation, and it's not necessary to pass through that fire separation to travel from one exit to another. And they define the distance between exits in sentence 3 shall be the shortest distance that the smoke would have to travel between the exits, assuming the smoke will not penetrate intervening fire separation. And the distance between so this is for interior exits. Let's take a look at that. Distance is more than 9 meters. Distance between exits is required to be at least 9 meters when it's served by a public corridor. I've got 2 exits. So it does not have to be more than 9 meters. The distance needs to be half the maximum, the diagonal dimension of the floor area, but not less than 9 meters for all floor areas. So in this case, I have the distance needs to be not less than half the diameter, the maximum diameter. In this case, it's a square, but I guess this is the maximum diameter. So this distance needs to be at least half that. The distance is not regulated where the floor area is divided. The floor area is divided into fire compartment, and with at least 1/3 of the floor area is on one side. So here I have a floor area divided in 2. I have access to my exit from here. I have access to my exit from here. This is at least half of the area, half of the area. I meet both conditions here. Distance between exterior exits, this is important. It's been added to the NBCC 15. The distance between 2 exterior exits, I'm reading in 34234. The distance between 2 exterior discharges, this is where it leads to the outside. 2 exterior discharges of exit stairs serving the same floor area shall be not less than 9 meters and not less than 6 meters where the building is sprinkled throughout, and the 2 exterior discharges are located within 15 meters of the street. So you can locate your excess discharges first. They have to be at 9 meters. If the building is sprinkled and the discharges, both of them, are not more than 15 meters away from a street, then you can locate them within, the distance between them should not be less than 6 meters. So, and this is an illustration of exit discharges.
So does this mean that you can't do this? You can't put 2 exit stairs like this at 508 apart?
Yeah, I mean, this drawing is really really badly drawn.
Stream,
and
right?
yeah, so it should say this is not permitted. It should have a cross on it, and the cross is not showing because you're showing here that this distance needs to be more than 9 meters or more than 6 meters. Yeah, it's equal or greater, less greater or equal to 9 and 6 depending on the condition. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for catching that, Matt. Dan, thank you. Okay. So that's for exits. We're gonna go through travel distance. Any question on exits? Okay. Travel distance. What how good? Okay. The travel distance from 3424 to 325. So this is again, we're still going into the exits. We're looking at 3424 travel distance. 3425 is location of exits. Okay. The distance from any point in a floor area to an exit measured along the path of exit travel. That's the travel distance. Depending on each occupancy, the maximum travel distance permitted is 45 meters for a sprinkled floor area. For a high hazard building is 25 meters. For a group D occupancy is 40 meters. In other in unsprinkled buildings, it's 30 meters unless it's a group D occupancy, it's 40 meters. And for storage garages and specific condition permitted for storage garages, it's 60 meters. That's, remember, that's for an open air garage. There is an exception for the distances in 34251E. It's the 60 meter in any storage garage that conforms to the requirements 32290 and 3425F, 30 meter any floor area that other than those referenced in A to E. So if you don't know your building is sprinklered, it's 30 meter, unless you know that it's an F1 hazard, it's 25 meter. If you know the building is sprinklered, it's 45 meter, except again, high hazard does not apply. If an open air storage garage that meets the requirements of 32290, then you can place the exits so that you can travel to them within a 60 meter distance. So that's 3425. Measuring the travel distance to an exit. Where furniture is indicated on the plan is the travel distance is measured around the furniture. So this here, we're looking from the furthest distance in the floor area to an exit, the nearest exit, not to every exit, okay? Where the furniture is not indicated, travel distance must be measured from the furthest point of the floor area around any wall. The 300 millimeter approximately from all up to the nearest exit. I mean, it's an approximation, it's a best practice, but take a look at where the furniture is indicated on the plan. Typically, that's how they are submitted. Travel distance is measured around the furniture, and it's to the nearest exit for that floor area. Here I am dealing with a sprinkled occupancy group D. The travel distance must be less than equal to 45 meter. Okay.
Sorry, Amal.
Yeah.
Can you give an example of 34251D, the 105 meters? I'm not quite getting what that would be for.
Oh yeah, these are in your malls, typically in your malls, when you have a public corridors, large public corridors, in which rooms and suites, they're not separated from the remainder of the floor area. So this is in a mall setting. But then the public corridor is not less than 9 meter wide. The ceiling height is not less than 4 meter. The building is sprinkled throughout, and not more than one half of the required egress doorways from a room or suite opening into the public corridor is required to have more than one egress doorway. So this is typical for your mall buildings.
Okay, thanks. That makes sense.
Okay. That's within 105 meter. But it's got conditions associated with it in 34251D. Okay. So we're extending the travel distance may be extended in a floor area by measuring from an egress door to an exit versus measuring from the most remote portion of the floor area, provided the suite or room is separated from the remainder of the floor area by a fire separation. So 34242 allows you to measure the measured travel distance from the egress door and not from the furthest point. So this allowance is permitted if that area is separated by a fire separation, and you see that for if you're in a condo building, you know that your unit is separated, your travel distance is measured from the door to an exit. Except for a high hazard occupancy for group F1, a travel distance is not required provided exits are spaced 60 meters around the perimeter of a building and each main aisle within the facility leads directly to an exit. So this one is 34252. A lot of this applies to warehouse buildings where you've got 60-meter exits, you've got aisles within the facility and circulation through aisles, main aisles, secondary aisles, and the travel distance can be increased provided that you have the exits spaced at 60 meters around the building.
Amal, I have a question. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
So if we have a group C occupancy, let's say for an apartment building, the corridor that it serves, do we also consider that the public corridor and it will fall under the 9-meter category for the travel distance?
Oh no. No, because no, that's separated because you've got fire separation of all the occupancies are required to be separated from that corridor because of their units. So that does not apply to residential occupancies. No. Okay, so that's one. So this is leading, you will see this. So you've got the exits located here, 60 meters from each other, and you've got your main aisle leading directly to an exit. Travel distance to an egress door, there's requirements in terms of provisions that you need to get to an egress door before you get to an exit. Many ASGA request that travel distance 25 meters be achieved to a point where a person can go to 2 separate directions to different exits from within a room or a suite. So that's a fire code provisions that typically, and for buildings, when you're putting your floor layout, your furniture layout, you need to address the fire code provisions for office spaces, and take a look. That's a fire code rule in there. Egress from suites provided. So now we're going back to which section? 3.3. Let's see. Take a look. Let's take a look at it. 3.315. We talked about those. Provided all of the following conditions are met, a suite is permitted to be served by a single egress doors. We went through that in the tables 3315A. So the area, the travel distance, the number of egress doors provided from a street. The travel distance is not exceeded. Morgan, I see your question regarding the panic hardware. A lot of chat on this one here. So we'll take a look at that and I'll give you the reference to it later. I'll take a look at that question and reference it to you. Okay. Okay, so we went through this one before in terms of locating. There is multiple conditions that need to be met. It's the travel distance to the egress doorway. We've got the area of the suite, and this relates on whether we provide 2 egress doors or not. And then occupant load of the suite does not exceed 60 persons. Let's see, a question as to an example. Is this suite permitted to be served by a single means of egress? From here to here is 15 meters. Do I know what's the occupancy? I got a group D occupancy. It's not sprinklered. The area was 150 and the occupant load is 16%. So we checked the 60. It's not sprinklered. Let's double check. And it's a group D. Let's double check. It's a group G, less 150, and it's less than 115. So I can have just one door. A single egress permitted. You see how you applied it? Okay, so a suite is required to be served by at least 2 means of egress. So what's the definition of suite? We saw it at the beginning. It's in 14121. So take a look. You can take a look at it again. A suite is required to be served by at least 2 means of egress. If the suite consists of an F1 occupancy, the occupant loads exceed 60%. The travel distances are exceeded in an unsprinklered or sprinkler building. Okay, let's take a look at that. So this is the opposite. We have group D office, sprinklered area 150, occupant load is 50. The suite itself is required to have 2 means of egress. Let's see, it's a D occupancy, 150 square meters. I've got an occupant load. This is sprinklered. Occupant load is 50, so it's less than 60. And travel distance is less than 25. From here, I have it 25. This one, travel distance is 35 meters to here. Travel distance is greater than 25 here. Therefore, 2 egress doors are required. If this travel distance was less, then it would be one egress doors would be permitted. Okay. Okay, so we looked at that. 25 meters is not exceeded to an egress doorway. 45 meters is not exceeded to an exit. If the suite is separated from the corridor, you can measure the 25 meter to an egress door and provide the 45 meter to an exit from the door of the suite. So if the suite is separated and you've got a corridors separated from the suites, and then you can measure your egress, the number of doors required depending on the suite size and the travel distance within the suite to the egress door. And then because there you've got a separation of all the suites, all these suites must be separated from the corridor to be able to use the travel distance measured only from the corridor to the exit stair, to the nearest exit stair. People forget that when you say the corridor is separated, the corridor is separated from all these suites, not just the suite that we are dealing with. Okay. So here it's this one, I didn't mention that one. If there are two means of egress, you can have the 45 meter travel distance could be measured to the means of egress, and an additional 45 could be measured to the exit. So if we have two doors, you can have up to 45 meter here, and then you can have up to 45 meter here. And this is what this one is saying. Distance between egress doors, 33152. Egress doors must be spaced so at least 1/3 of the maximum diagonal dimension of the suite. So if you've got more than one egress door, you have to separate them so at least 1/3 of the maximum diagonal distance measured for the suites. So you've got, these are the two, and this distance here between the two egress doors must be 1/3 of this. Okay, so I've got one suite here. I've got the diagonal is 24. So 1/3 of that would be 8 meters. So my egress doors for my suite must be 8 meters, 1/3 of 24. So what happens if the doors are spaced more than 8 meters apart? So what you can do here, you can provide a fire separation so that the smoke does not travel between the doors. And in that case, you can have the protection of egress from the suites to the doors. Well, now we go to, okay, it's already 2 o'clock. We can do calculating occupant load capacities. I think what I'll do is, okay, we can do it very quickly if you guys want to do that, and we'll pick up calculating occupant doors, occupant loads capacities. Is that okay? Let's finish. Yeah, okay, good. Let's finish the module. All right. So the occupant, calculating the occupant load, you have to calculate the occupant load for what? For determining what?
Washroom counts.
Washroom counts. Another one.
Exit width.
Exit widths, yeah, to see if my exits are wide enough or have enough capacity to accommodate the number of floor occupants. So my exit widths. We looked at calculation of occupant loads. We needed to know those to determining also, we saw that yesterday for the determination of high buildings. When we have 18-meter building between 18 and 36 meters, we need to calculate the occupant loads to determine basically the whether the building is high or not. So determination of occupant load is critical. It's the number of persons for which a building or part thereof is designed. The occupant load is used to ascertain if adequate exits and egress doors are provided, enough water closets are provided. We also saw that for a fire alarm building, you saw the conditions for providing a fire alarm in non-sprinkler building depends on the number of people in the building. So determining fire alarm is required. For emergency lighting and exit signage, and if the building needs to be classified as a high building, the direction of door swing. So if you want to determine if the door can swing to the inside instead towards the path of egress, so if it's in some cases it can swing in opposite to the path of egress, and that depends also on the number of people using the room and the door. Occupant loads are determined by the number of fixed seats, if you are assembly spaces or educational spaces with fixed seats, 2 persons per sleeping room in a dwelling for dwelling units, the number of persons for which the area is designed, or as calculated based on table 3.1.17.1. Another critical table for you to be aware of, and tab this one, it's 3.1.17.1. Let's take a look at it. Occupant loads. Is right before 3.2. You can see the occupant loads. The occupant loads can be determined based on design. But if you do that, if you determine it based on design, you take a look at 3.1.17.1.2. If a floor area or part thereof is designed for an occupant load other than that determined by the table, 3.1.17.1, a permanent sign indicating the occupant load shall be posted in a conspicuous location. So the building code, you don't have to use the occupant load factor to calculate the occupant loads for each area. You can do it based on your own design, and you know that this building is going to be designed by those number of occupants in those different areas. If you decide to do it that way and you not use the load factors, you gotta put a sign and put the maximum number of people that are allowed in that space. However, if you use the occupant load factors of table 3.1.17.1, except for dwellings, you take it two persons per sleeping room. The number of persons for you can take, or the numbers of fixed seats for assembly spaces. Then you take a look the calculation of the area per person and multiply it by the area, and that gives you the occupant load for that area. So the occupant load factor is basically the area per person in meters squared. So, and so
a quick question.
Go ahead.
In practice, using this table 3.1.17.1, I've found that the numbers become astronomical for most of the buildings I've worked on, just because of the factor that they give. So in most cases, we do it by design. What has your experience been?
It really depends on, I mean, for educational classrooms, it's a lot. Then it's quite large. For airports, it's also a lot. For office spaces, you know, it's reasonable for office spaces, but you can do it also by design for office spaces. Assembly areas for meeting rooms, you want to do it. You want to designate the maximum occupant load for the meeting room. So it's really, most of the time, it depends on the use of the area of the room that you deal with. Okay. So calculating occupant load, measure the area of the floor area in a room, determine the use of all the floor area, depending on the use of each floor area. So we can have multiple calculations for the different floor areas and multiple occupant loads, and divide the floor area in meters squared by the occupant load factor, and that gives you the number of people in it. So occupancy group D, I've got the building core is 240 square meter. That's not occupied. The office space is 1,400. The floor area, we don't remember the floor area is the building core is not included in my floor area for the purposes of definition of floor area. So the floor area divided by the occupant load factor, which is area per person in meters squared. So 0.75, the 1400 divided by, if I am in a, let's see, business and personal office, is 4.6 for shops and 9.3 for by 9.3, and I get 51 persons. So when you're doing calculation for egress, you don't have, you're dealing with 151 person, you want to round this number up so that you can divide it, unless you have more than one more than two exits, then you can look at different subdivisions of the number of people per exits. But for washrooms, if we have 151 persons, then for evaluating number of people per washrooms, we take an occupant load of 152 divided by 2, and then that's how many we have for female and male. Exit capacity, the minimum width of exits is required to be determined by multiplying the occupant load by 6.1 millimeter per person for ramps, the slope of not more than 1 in 8, doorways, corridors, and passageways. So now we have determined our occupant load. We've got 151 persons. Do we have enough exit capacity? Like, what is the minimum exit width we need to have? We know that there is specification for minimum exit width for the stairs and minimum door width required for exit door width required for doors. However, is that sufficient to serve the people on this floor area? So we're going to have to calculate the occupant load for each floor of office and unit in here, add them up, and then we're going to take the total of that and address the exit width if it meets the, it provides exit capacity. So if we have 6.1 millimeter per person, we need a total exit capacity of 6.1 times the occupant load for that floor area. Same thing for exit corridors, exit passageways, and exit doorways. For stairs, it's 8 millimeter per person for stairs consisting of steps whose rise is not more than 180 and whose run is not less than 280. And 9.2 millimeter per person for ramps and slopes of more than 1 in 8 or stairs other than those noted above. So with 18.4 millimeter per person for all group B occupancy. So if you have areas with group B occupancies, floor areas with group B occupancy, your exit capacity needs to be determined on multiplying 18.4 millimeter by the number of occupants of the group B occupancies. Most characteristic elements determines the maximum exit capacity. So even though that we have minimum requirements for exit width and door width, we still need to have the exit capacity subdivided between the ones that the total occupant load to make sure that we have sufficient. While we know that while we do that, we need to make sure that any one single exit cannot contribute to more than 50% of the required exit capacity. So when you're subdividing the occupants between the both exits, you want to make sure that you don't put more people onto one exit than the other exits. So number of exits 2, number of exits times exit width divided by the factor. So 2 times, I've got 2 exits, each of 1100, 2 times 1100, 1100 divided by 9.2 millimeter per person, that gives me the exit capacity per person. So per stair, the per stair is 1100 divided by 9.2 people. The 2 is because I have 2 stairs. That's the total that those 2 stairs can accommodate 239 persons. So in general, those 2 exit stairs will allow me to an occupant load, a maximum occupant load on that floor of 239 person. Okay? So with that, we have any question on this one?
So if you had a higher occupant load than 239 on a floor above, this stair would need to be widened to accommodate the floor above.
No, this is two separate floors, so you don't add the people above. You do it floor by floor.
Right, but so if the floor above had an occupant load of 250, wouldn't
Then
the stair course need to be widened to accommodate them coming down?
No, because the 250 it needs to be only the stair width from above. The above stair needs to accommodate the width of the occupant load of the story that it serves. Now you can, if that number of people is 250, then you maintain the stair width all the way down. But this is going
Right.
down, so that's the way to address it. But you don't add up the number of people from 250 under the 239. So the door width is going to be based on 239, not the 250 plus the people, not the people in on the floor, right? So
Yeah, I understand.
you guys are following us? So the stair width is going to be determined if you're coming from the, so that's why when you're looking at the occupant load, you start from the top. And that's your stair width is going to be designed based on the stair width coming down until you hit a floor area where it's got a lot of people, and those people, but you measure your stair width is based on the occupant load of each floor, and it keeps constant until you hit a floor with much larger occupant load. That occupant load is going to impact the exit stair width on that floor, and then your stair becomes wider and it keeps going down with the new width. However, when you're looking at each floor, you know that for this floor, it's going to be accommodated anyways, because if well, we still don't have the total occupant load on this. We don't know with 150 in this. We know that 150 in this space is 150. Then I know that with all these people, I'm probably going to exceed 239 person if I have office spaces like that. And I will need more than 2 exits for that floor space. So
Can I ask a question about why we don't take the door width, which is more restrictive, and we take the stair width?
You do both, but the factor, the stair factor is more restrictive, which is 9.2. The door width factor is 6.1. So when you're dividing 6.1, when you divide your by that, it's going to give you more capacity for the door than than you would have for the stair.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And Safira, you got a question. Do you always have to design to use the allowable occupant load, or you can state that you are designing for an actual occupant load for which you lower it will be allowed? Yeah, we saw that. Yeah, you can design for the, you can have a design occupant load that, and we covered that. That's in 3.1.17.1.2. Okay. And 3.1.17.1.1c. Any other questions? Okay. Did I miss any question from before? No, I think we covered them all. Safira, are you clear on the answer? Safira? Yes, okay, perfect. So we can take a break now, and then you can log on to module 3 right away. Because we pretty much covered everything.
Actually, one more question.
Go ahead.
Why did we use 9.2 millimeters instead of 8 millimeters for stairs?
Because that's the stairs now that you are minimum requirements. So for the dimensions that we have, it's 9.2 is the factor that we would use.
Okay.
Okay.
Were we gonna cover the door hardware?
The door hardware, we have not covered it. If you have any questions related to door hardware, just send it to me. It's in 3.3 with the egress when we looked at the egress, and in 331, and then take a look at the door hardware in 331. If you have any question related to it, please send it to me and I'll address it and I'll share it with the group.